our conversation with ESPN's This Is Football podcast host Kevin Clark. He took in Bills training camp last week out at St. John Fisher before they wrapped up operations out there. So we're going to take our time now to check in with Kevin, see what his overarching thoughts are on the Bills for the 2025 campaign. All right, Kevin, I know the Bills training camp was on your travel itinerary this summer, and, you talked to some higher-ups, including Mr. Bean. Now that we see the James Cook extension come to fruition, what do you look back upon in terms of your conversations with Bean? Because I don't think anybody ever hit the panic button on this one. What were the inklings you were given in that conversation, knowing we're here now with an extension in hand?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard because I went to a bunch of teams that should have Super Bowl aspirations this year. I went to Baltimore, I went to Buffalo. Obviously, I visited with Cincinnati, but they got to figure out their defense. And I think with a lot of it, it's just, hey, we're going to retool a little bit, but we got to have all the same guys who contributed last year back. And so the James Cook thing, to me, I was there on the first day that he didn't practice. And again, I didn't press the panic button. It was not to me, guys. Like, I went to Washington where Terry McLaurin's not practicing. I think you might want to hit the panic button there because of how much he means to that franchise. I think the James Cook thing was always going to get done. I think he's really valuable. I think you saw the players talk about how valuable he was, and they needed that. And I always look at some of these teams, whether that's Buffalo or Baltimore, who have not obviously gotten to a Super Bowl in the AFC. And it's just a matter of staying in the fight. It's just a matter of maximizing the roster every single year and eventually going to break through. Someone in Baltimore, John Harbaugh, and someone in Buffalo, Deion Dawkins, said it's not do or die for Super Bowl because they know that they've got a window. And more importantly, guys, if you focus too much on January and February, you don't focus on September and October, and you don't get to January or February. So to me, looking back on it, this was always going to get done. James Cook was too valuable, and James Cook probably knew the window the Bills have, which is they've got a window here, 4 or 5 years, where they're going to have a really good roster with an elite quarterback, and there's going to be a special run there. I don't think Cook wanted to miss that.
One of the things about the atmosphere here in Buffalo is that it's almost taken so much for granted how good this team is with Josh Allen, how good the program is, the culture they've built, the roster that they've built. James Cook was really the only thing left to talk about. You came to training camp. What are some of the things that jumped out of you? To us, we made the comment in year 8 of the Sean McDermott era. It was a well-oiled machine. I mean, even we noticed how easy, training camp just
just flows.
It just flows. What did you notice about it? And I know that James Cook thing is the first thing we asked you about, but that was really the only hot topic.
It's funny. A lot of times with these training camp tours, you can judge a team by its problems. If a team is trying to figure out who the quarterback is, whether or not they've got an offensive coordinator, or whether they've got a starting offensive line, that's when you can pencil in 6, 7, 8, 9 wins, right? When you're talking about the problem being a running back contract that's going to get resolved, which it did, as you said, it's a well-oiled machine. And so I think that's a really good way to put it. And there's a couple of teams we visited that were like that, where they just knew what was at hand, what a practice should look like for a team that wins a lot of games, and they're just right back at it. It was funny talking to Bean. He said, look, the offense, that wasn't the problem last year. I think he said that a couple of times this year in different interviews. But on the defense, they wanted to reinvent the defensive line. And one of the things he looked at was the Super Bowl, where you play the Chiefs, you get pressure on the quarterback, you get a lead early, which the Eagles were able to do. All of a sudden, the Chiefs are one-dimensional. All of a sudden, we saw what happened in that game. That's what they're trying to build in the front seven right now, where they're able to just be relentless after the quarterback, because that's the thing that they're focused on now, is understanding, obviously, the process in August, September, October, but understanding in January, they've got to get stops against Mahomes. They've got to get more stops, even though they beat Lamar Jackson last year. They got to get more stops against him. And they figured out that retooling and emphasizing the defensive line is the way to do that. So that, to me, was what I was watching. And it was funny to me, one-on-ones, guys, and you go to a lot of practices, one-on-ones to me in the trenches are really fascinating to watch, because you just see the raw strength of some of these guys. And you get to see it. Just, even an idiot like me, I haven't played since 10th grade. I can see who's good and who's not. And to see Joey Bosa in some of these reps, where it looked like he was going 40% sometimes. He wasn't. He just knew what moves to make, and all of a sudden he's able to do a spin move, or all of a sudden he's able to knock over a sixth-round pick. It was really cool to see, and so I think they're going to have a lot of that on the D-line this year. They know the moves. They've got strength, the mixture of draft and free agency, obviously. I think there's going to be – I do think Brandon Beane is going to have mission accomplished as far as retooling that D-line.
Yeah, and obviously in free agency, they added some veterans. You know, Larry Ogunjobi's kind of an insurance move on the interior. They know they don't have him for the first 6 weeks, and I think there was a little bit of trepidation just from the standpoint of you have two young players in T.J. Sanders and Deion Walker on the defensive interior there, but how are they going to fare, you know, in their first foray into NFL football? And the early signs from T.J. Sanders have been outstanding. I mean, it's not only happened in practice. We saw it in the first preseason game against the Giants. He's winning sometimes before an offensive lineman's even out of his stance. I mean, the quickness with which he operates for a man his size is pretty darn impressive. And I think the Bills are breathing a lot easier knowing they have a rotational group to swing through after Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver. I mean, if Sanders and then Walker can come along too, I don't think those first 6 weeks without Hoyt and Ogunjobi seem nearly as daunting with some of what you described. Bean told you he wants this defense to be going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's how you do it, by the way. You get a deep rotation because the best teams, whether that's the Seahawks going back a decade, I mean, like the best teams with the actual front seven. You look at the Eagles last year; they were deep there. They could send guys. They could if one guy got injured for a game, they were able to send a guy up. And you're already seeing it now, where they lose Milt Williams, and all of a sudden they're working in more guys in the interior, and they look just as good in Philadelphia. That's the kind of machine you got to build, and that's the kind of machine the Bills are trying to build. So I completely agree. I mean, throwing. My test on it is, are you throwing resources at the problem? And the Bills did that. They signed insurance policies. You mentioned T.J. Sanders, obviously, looking really good. I think that there's an old line in Moneyball that I think about a lot, where Billy Beane says, if you have to do something, you're screwed. And I oftentimes think, like, if you've got one path to solving your problem, oh, this guy has to hit. Oh, this guy has to, carry the load in the first 6 weeks. If you have to do something, if you're relying on one thing, normally that's when you end up, oh, this guy picked up a toe injury at the wrong time. All of a sudden the season's over. The Bills won't have that problem in the front seven. They threw resources at the problem, and I'm extremely optimistic about what that's going to look like.
And we take a little bit of a wider view here once in a while away from the Bills. Mostly we go as wide as the AFC East, and that's about it. We saw the Patriots look really good in their preseason opener. Brownie and I have talked about how much love and respect we've got for Mike Vrabel and what he'll be able to bring to that table, to that team. And, of course, their quarterback, Drake May, turned some heads last year. What do you think about not only the Patriots but also the Dolphins and the Jets in the AFC East this year?
The Dolphins, I've been pretty low on them. I think they're built for 2 years ago. I think they had a window, and if I was a Dolphins fan, it'd break my heart, because they really did have a good roster a couple of years ago, and then they get hurt at the wrong time. They have to go play a cold weather game. They're banged up. Their genuinely good pass rush was wrecked by injury, and all of a sudden they're an old expensive roster 2 years later with an offensive line that's a question mark. The pass rush with Chalk Robinson and Chubb can be good. I just don't think that's enough. I mean, for me, the one thing I look at is that the first 2 years in Miami, Tyreek Hill led the NFL in deep receptions with 20 in each season. Last year he had 5. And so when you don't have that, the offense changes dramatically. And so Dolphins, to me, I'm going to put in a bucket there and not think much about. Jets, I think it's going to be a slower build. Aaron Glenn comes from the Dan Campbell world, where they didn't skip steps in Detroit. They didn't skip steps. And Brad Holmes, their GM in Detroit, had told me a really funny phrase when I was there the first year. He said, listen, the first year in Detroit is just the HVAC year. They're just trying to get the insulation in, and they're trying to get the
right.
the air conditioning in. And I think that's a really good way that they put that. And then all of a sudden, he said, year 3 is the chandelier year. That's the year we say, hey, let's go out and get these bells and whistles, because the foundation is built, the lines are built, the trenches are built. And so I think I think you're going to see more of that in New York, where they're not going to try to win now. The one thing I'll say is that in that conversation I had a couple years ago with Brad Holmes, he said Jared Goff's not a bridge quarterback. Everybody rolled their eyes. And now the Jets are trying to do the same thing with Justin Fields. I wouldn't laugh it off. They can build something around him. I just don't think it's going to be this year. Now the Patriots are interesting to me because Mike Vrabel has made a living out of winning games that he shouldn't win. Like we saw that in Tennessee, where he took a roster to the 1 seed that had no business being the 1 seed. He toughens teams up. He builds culture. He challenges guys in the right way. He connects with guys in a way that I think is really underrated. He's a former player who uses that. I think there's a lot of good players, guys, who become coaches and that don't have patience with guys who aren't as talented, guys who aren't as good. Mike Vrabel, I talked to him a couple of years ago. He said, the one thing he understands, he was never a great player. He was a good enough athlete who figured it out. And I think that's a good way to come from it from a coaching perspective. He wants guys to figure it out. Does it happen in year one? I don't know. They spent a lot of money. I mentioned Mitt Williams earlier, Stephon Diggs. Everybody loves Kyle Williams, that wide receiver from Washington State. I think Drake May showed some things. I think it starts up front with the offensive line. I think that was the worst offensive line I've seen in a long time last year. And there's a lot of competition for that. I'll tell you a story. I do ESPN radio with Justin Pugh, and obviously former offensive lineman. And we're watching a game last year, and I saw one of the worst pass protection reps I've ever seen in my life from the right tackle in New England. And a couple series later, I see on Twitter, so-and-so got benched. I go, oh, that guy got benched. And it was the other tackle who got benched. It was we were so bad that both of the tackles could have been benched, okay? And like that, when that happens and you're a rookie quarterback, what do you even do? I mean, kind of similar thing with Caleb Williams. I saw the other day, Caleb Williams had 64 unblocked pressures last year because the offensive line just had no idea where things were coming from. What do you do when you're a young quarterback like that? You're put in position to fail. And so I want to see credibility around Drake May, and I think Mike Vrabel's going to do it. I think we use a long history of him, jumping into drills and making sure everybody's physical. They're going to be prepared. It's not going to be like last year with Gerard Mayo. I think they're going to be a lot better. And if I had to guess right now, I think they're probably going to be the second place team in the division. I think the Bills are the only team. I know I don't want to give any rat poison, but I think they might be the only team right now in the league. Just thinking about it, maybe Baltimore's in the same boat where you can start ordering the division title banners right now.
Yeah, we feel similarly about the Patriots. We wouldn't be surprised if they're the second place team by the end of the year in this division.
Yeah.
Last one for you, Kevin. It might seem lofty, but it's something the Bills have not achieved in their playoff runs of the last several years, and that's the 1 seed in the AFC. I don't know if it came up in your conversation with Brandon Beane, but the bye week has been invaluable for the Chiefs in their appearance in 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls or whatever the number is. So, first of all, did Beane even bring it up? Was it mentioned in your conversation, number one? And then number two, how realistic is that brass ring for the Bills this year? I mean, the Ravens we know are loaded for bear. The Chiefs are still the Chiefs. Cincinnati could maybe rise up if they can figure out their defense, and there might be a dark horse in there as well. But the number 1 seed with the Bills' schedule, just how realistic?
Well, first of all, I want to throw in Denver into that dark horse conversation.
Like
because
them.
Amazing offensive line, one of the best defenses in football. And my elevator pitch here is if the question, kind of what we're talking about, judge a teams by its problems. If the problem is Sean Payton needs to raise the floor of a quarterback, I'll take that problem. Okay, I think they can figure that one out. So I put them in the contender category as well. The 1 seed, they're just as we'll see. I mean, like we mentioned the division earlier, Kansas City. That's a really hard division. That's 3 hard outs where you're going to have a real problem. Where I think Buffalo, I don't know. I don't see those roadblocks as far as the schedule goes. Baltimore, Cincinnati can beat you. Cincinnati can beat you 45-42. We'll see what happens with the defense this year. But Cincinnati is a really good team. Pittsburgh has a team that's going to have a winning record because Mike Tomlin always does. And then all of a sudden you add in Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, pretty good. Cleveland, obviously, as the saying goes, Browns are Browns. But I think I look at this division. I look at the way this team is rounding into shape, and it's the 1 seed is incredibly realistic, guys. I think that I'm just looking at this AFC and I'm seeing a lot of stacked divisions, and I'm not seeing that in the East. So I'm intrigued to see what happens this year. I'm also, again, part of the reason they don't view it as do or die in Buffalo is because they don't want to get ahead of themselves. They're embracing the process of what September, October, November means, and that's how you end up winning 15, 14 games necessary to get that 1 seed.
Kevin, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time. It's good stuff as always.
All right, anytime, guys.